Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. I'm Associate Editor Gemma Cray.
And I'm Editor Stephen Galvin. And today we present a very special podcast supported by Screen Ireland.
We are delighted to welcome producer, co-founder and co-CEO of Element Pictures, Ed Guiney. Ed has been nominated for 3 Oscars for Best Picture for Room, The Favourite and Poor Things, and has won 2 BAFTAs and 1 Golden Globe.
Ed will be joined by Niall Murphy. Niall is an independent media consultant for the Irish film and TV industry. Since 2008, he has served as editor of Irish screen industry publication Scunan.
How are you doing, Ed?
Yeah, nice to be chatting to you.
So this is to get a kind of background and to the story of you and Element Pictures and the massive success that you guys have enjoyed over the last 20 years, particularly in the last 10 years. You know that when it seems to have accelerated at a rate of knots from humble origins, shall we say. So can we go back in time to your sort of start in the industry, your time with when you were in college with Lenny, or you want to go back to before that?
Yeah, I mean, well, very briefly, I mean, I sort of knew Lenny when I was a kid, like a teenager around Dublin, and when I subsequently went to Trinity, I had the idea to set up a filmmaking society, and so I called Lenny, and we set up a filmmaking society called the Trinity Video Company back in those days. This is kind of late 80s, I guess. And we made some sort of documentaries and films. And then I guess the first sort of thing that we did that sort of got any attention was a film called Three Joes with Michael Murphy, Gary Cook and Dominic West, written by Michael West, directed by Lenny. We were all around college at the same time. And that went on to win a few prizes at international festivals, and that's really, I suppose, kind of where it began.
That's the start of it all.
Mm-hmm.
But Three Joes, kind of, if you look at it, is the sort of starting point for an awful lot of people who are still quite large names within the industry. I mean, Stephen Rennicks is on it as well.
Yeah,
Emma Reynolds.
yeah.
So you have. It's the beginning of the sort of foundation of your and Lenny's core team in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was also actually just at that time there was a lot of people working on each other's shorts. Like John Moore worked as a gaffer on it. I think Damien might have worked on it. Hugh Lenehan, who's now at the Irish Times, was the first AD. Leslie McKim, who's a well-known producer, was the script supervisor. So there was a thing where people were working on each other's shorts at that time, you know, all kind of voluntary, really, you know, all kind of in college or whatever, young at least. And so there was a good energy around that. And that kind of then preceded the re-establishment of what is now Screen Ireland, then the Irish Film Board in 93 by our president, Michael D. Higgins. So we were all kind of, I suppose we made a couple of shorts, etc. by the time that got re-established, and that became a really important focus for the next phase of our careers, which is moving from short films into feature films, etc.
And it was at this time then that you founded or were involved in Temple Films.
Yes. I set up a production company which was called Indigo, not maybe the best name, and then I set up Temple, and that was really run out of a music recording studio, which was partly owned by Lenny and Stephen Rennicks in Bow Lane at the back of College of Surgeons, and started making. The first thing I did was Ailsa, Paddy Brannock's debut film, which was written by Joe Connor and was a Irish-German French co-production. And at that time, my business partner was Stephen Bradley, who I was in college with, is now a writer-director also. And we're very old pals. And we just set up this small company and really started with Paddy's first film, which we made in I guess the mid-90s, 94, I think, something like that.
Yeah, and then at the same time, Lenny was off doing commercial work, and he was working with Johnny Spears and stuff. So you had you hadn't yet you were still doing shorts and stuff together, but you hadn't yet stumbled upon that formula that would come to fruition a couple of years later with Adam and Paul.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Lenny he went to Stanford for a while. He was studying and decided that wasn't the path. Academia wasn't the path for him, and then came back to Ireland and gradually kind of started making commercials with Johnny, as you say. And we were talking all the time and, trying to find the right thing. And then Johnny introduced him to Mark O'Halloran's script for Adam and Paul. And we came on board. At that point, we were Element. This is early 2000s. We came on board as producers with Johnny Spears. And that, became Lenny's first film, Adam and Paul.
So then just prior to that happening, then Andrew exited the film board, and the two of you together formed Element Pictures.
That's right. Yeah, and again, a lot of my, my kind of working relationship and partnership now are very, very long standing. Again, Andrew, I knew again back in school days. Actually, we weren't in school together, but similarly with Len, kind of moved in the same circles, and I knew him. His cousin was in my year in school. Andrew, as he will remind you, is 2 years younger than me, so we weren't exactly contemporaries, but pretty close. And we were friends. And then, when he came out of Screen Ireland, or the Irish Film Board as it was, as head of business affairs, we set up Element together. And at that time, it was kind of, I think, around 2001. The idea was that we would do, both kind of what were called co-productions, but effectively service productions for, incoming projects. And then we'd build our own slate of films. And the first thing we did was Peter Mullen's The Magdalene Sisters, where we were executive producers of that. And we were then doing kind of American films, shooting in Ireland, etc., to make a bit of money, but had no kind of real editorial involvement in those projects.
I mean, that's a pathway that's well forged by a number of other companies in Ireland. I mean, Metropolitan being the most successful of them, doing the service work for the huge US productions, and it's still a big business today. It's bigger in many ways than the one.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it worked well for us for a while. We then set up a business with Arthur Lappin and Jim Sheridan to kind of give ourselves a bit more high profile internationally, particularly in the States, again to service projects coming into Ireland. And the idea was that we would use the kind of that cash flow to help support our own efforts around project development, etc. And we also got involved in other projects in a kind of slightly hybrid way. For instance, Oma, Pete Travis's film, which was written by Paul Greengrass and Guy Hibbert, and myself and Paul Greengrass produced together, where it came in as a kind of follow-up to Bloody Sunday, which Jim and Arthur had done. So it was sort of an incoming project, but one that we then got involved in editorially. And the League of Gentlemen's Apocalypse was another similar one where we shot here, but we were kind of involved as editorial producers as well as kind of service producers. So there was a kind of that was a blending, and at the same time, trying to build our own slate. And once Adam Paul was out and unleashed, that became the making more films with Lenny became a real prospect at that point as well. So.
Yeah, because immediately then, 3 years after that, you had Garage with Lenny then as well as your next one that was Element on its own.
Exactly. No, exactly. We had Garage and generally we're quite busy in the mid 90s. So that was good. So
Garage is the reason that I am in the industry. Garage is the reason that I started writing about Irish film. Yeah, and so I saw it at Cannes in 2007, and then I was in TIFF as well, and I saw it again.
Ah,
And I came back and I was like, my God, we can make films like this in Ireland. Um,
oh,
I really
nice.
should be I really should be writing about this. And it's after that, it's a year after that in 2008 that I started Scanán. Um,
Ah, I see. And what were you doing at that point yourself?
so I was working for a Dutch financial services company.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, so they had just sent me to live in Amsterdam, to live and work in Amsterdam.
Ah, didn't
And
know
so
that.
I was missing home terribly. And that was what started me down the rabbit hole.
Ah,
Yeah.
hilarious. Um, yeah,
So
well, yeah. So we were all kind of starting off in those days. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, Garage then was like it was such a sort of breakout movie in many ways because it put Pat Short as well on the drama thing because everyone up to that point only knew him as a comedian, but suddenly you saw how good he could be as a dramatic actor, and it
Yeah.
was just
No,
uh,
absolutely. Yeah, he was amazing, and I mean, Mark's script was extraordinarily good. I remember it was just such a beautifully, I mean, such a great screenwriter, Mark O'Halloran, I should say, rather
yeah.
than Paul. And it was, I guess, also probably the first time we had investment from Film 4, which was very significant, and then subsequently became a very important partner to us, and still is actually still very important uh, collaborators. And the other kind of important thing about Garage for us was it was the first film we distributed. And I think we were involved as the Irish co-producers on The Wind That Shakes the Barley. And obviously we'd been involved with the Magdalene sisters, and we'd seen at that time how, some Irish films did absolute gangbusters in Ireland. And we thought that it would make sense for us to, have more of a say in the distribution of films in Ireland. And then, as now, Ireland is part of the UK territory, although that's, kind of there are more active Irish distributors now than there were then, of course. But it was very important for that. And actually, there's a few films in our kind of history that are kind of game changers. And in a way, Garage was a game changer, where it was the first thing we produced and distributed with some success as well. And yeah, it really made a mark internationally for Lenny also.
Yeah, and then the three, you as Element, Lenny again, and Mark decided that television was something that you wanted to make as well as features and had prosperity.
Yes, yes, yeah. It was. I think I can't exactly remember. I think just Mark had all these gorgeous sort of almost short stories that he stored up. These kind of useful little observational ideas about Dublin characters. Kind of some of them are in the Adam and Paul universe. It's almost like it's sort of almost happening contemporaneous with Adam and Paul, a lot of those stories, if you like. And yeah, we then built that into a 4-part series called Prosperity, which actually sort of probably hasn't been seen enough. It's a really, I mean, and I'm not saying this to compliment us in Element, to compliment Lenny and Mark. It's a really, really beautiful, gorgeous kind of moment in time in Dublin and Dublin characters, and yeah, really gorgeous series.
And so how Mark described it to me was that he was sitting on the bus following people around and listening to their
Yeah, that's
conversations.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
overheard on a bus in Dublin. Yeah, a bit of that. You're right about that. Yeah, that's very true.
And then I mean you go from that and you stay in that sort of oeuvre where you're making the international incoming work, you're doing some of your own stuff, but it's the next sort of stepping or milestone along the way seems to have been the Guard.
Yes,
It did.
definitely. Yeah, no, you're totally right there. And that was again, when you kind of look back, that there are just these films that turn out to be kind of real game changers for the company. And what was very important about that film for us was that we produced it with um John's UK producers, and John Michael McDonough's UK producers. So we did it together. And we also, though, and this was the crucial part, we were also, through investment from the Irish Film Board at that time, we were able to buy the UK and Irish rights as well as invest in the production. So we kind of had a kind of substantial stake in the distribution of the film in the UK and Ireland, and ended up co-distributing in the UK with Studio Canal. And the film turned out to be very successful. It was, I think, at that time, maybe still is even, the most successful kind of independently distributed Irish film in Ireland. So I can't quite remember what it did, but I think it was like €4.5 million at that time. And also we were back in the great days of when you could have sell-through video, and you could have your kind of premium videos that were sold to Extravision, and then you had your, all of that stuff, which is all gone from the value chain now, completely disappeared. So financially, it was very important for us. And actually, before we made that film, we were really struggling and were probably very close to going completely broke. And that film came along and really changed our fortunes. And also, I guess, gave us the confidence and maybe the kind of visibility to take on the Lighthouse cinema, which had gone bust around that time. Sort of, that was the great kind of, the tail end of the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 2010. And we were able to then rebid against UK operators, etc. And we managed to get the Lighthouse Cinema. And yeah, we've been operating that ever since. And yeah, never regretted that for a second. Always been delighted to be part of that. And yeah, quite very grateful for it.
No, I mean, it's a beautiful venue, and you do so many wonderful events there, like the Gladiator premiere and stuff,
Yeah.
that you can turn it into a proper event space as well as being a cinema, so it's and
Totally.
there's the things that you do by putting in sort of displays and those, that it makes it more than just your multiplex. It feels much more of a cinema than just going to a place that holds a screen and chairs,
I'm glad you think so. Yeah. I mean, we've got a great team there working to make it feel as vibrant.
And so this thing of many strands to the bow, of getting from not just from development and production of pictures, but also then television, and also then having your own distribution channels, and having the cinema, and to two cinemas now, because you got Palas, but that you see that as a crucial aspect, and crucial what makes Element.
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, it was never like by design, in the sense that we didn't kind of write a blueprint. Like we tend to be quite opportunistic. I think at the very core of the company is like we're film producers, movie producers, and everything else flows out from that. Everything else is adjacent to that. That's at the very center of it. And so, obviously television is very similar to film, although crucially different in some ways, but it's screenplay based and director based, etc. All of that. And then the distribution and cinemas flow from being film producers. But as I say, there was never a grand strategy around it. I think also partly to do with operating in a very small market where maybe you're kind of more pushed into diversifying a little bit more, because it's hard to kind of grow and hard to build a kind of production company out of here. Although we've always, I think, sort of seen ourselves, or tried to see ourselves at least, as a kind of European production company rather than an Irish company, if that makes sense. So that we've always tried to kind of have an international outlook in terms of where we make things and also with whom we make things. And clearly Ireland is really important to us, and some of the things we're most proud of we've made in Ireland, but we've also done a lot outside of Ireland. So that's always been a big impulse.
Which segues nicely into the next mile marker, which is Yorgos.
Yes. No, you're quite right about that. I mean, Yorgos, we first met in 2010 when he made Dogtooth, which was Oscar nominated that year, Best Foreign Language Film. And wonderful film. And at that point, we had a script for what became The Favourite, and we were looking to find a director to come on board that script. And we showed it to a lot of people, and then Yorgos popped up and he read it and he really saw the possibilities of it. So we started working with him way back in 2010. And then he moved from Greece to the UK because Greece was also having a calamitous sort of time financially, like Ireland, and moved to the UK and wanted to start making films in the English language. And he and F. Themis wrote the treatment for The Lobster, which I guess we read in probably 2011, 2012, and really brilliant treatment, very clear kind of outline of the film they wanted to make. And so we jumped on board that, and that became the first film that we produced with Yorgos, and we've now just finished our sixth film together recently, just wrapped our sixth film together. So that's obviously a really, really crucial relationship in our evolution as a company.
Yeah, so I mean, he brought that kind of that European cred as much as anything to the thing, and it got you. What you've been really good at is identifying these international directors who have an artistic vision that seems to match your own. I mean, you then work with Sebastian Lelio and with Sean Durkin and stuff. These wonderful art house directors who have something to say. You know, they're not guns for hire. They have an artistic merit to them.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think like a lot of it sort of just comes from our admiration of those filmmakers and their films and wanting to work with them. And it's almost like we're coming at it as fans as much as anything. And you know, I think we as a company and as the company's grown, I think our colleagues, producer colleagues like Emma Norton and Chelsea Morgan Hoffman, you know, also share similar sensibilities around making, I suppose, what is, you know, I guess reductively called art house films, but I guess they're art house with ambition. You know, they're kind of also called smart house, prestige, specialty, whatever, you know, indie maybe. But I think we've also, you know, we love the filmmakers and, you know, really want to help them bring their films to an international audience. And I think if we have a USP as a company, terrible phrase, I know, but if we have one, I think it's that we don't have one. In other words, I think we're very good at kind of bending ourselves around the shape of the filmmaker we're working with. Because obviously you take a Yorgos or a Lenny or a Joanna Hogg or a Sebastian or a Sean or a Paddy Brannock or any of these people, they're all so different to each other, you know, in terms of how they like to work. And I think what we're very good at doing is saying, well, look, we'll support you in the way that you want to work and the way that allows you to do your best work. And that's different for every one of those filmmakers. And I think we've sort of found a niche in doing that. And that's something that we're very excited to keep doing and build on and be more ambitious and bold about that as we go forward.
I mean, it's something that is definitely unique to an Irish production company. And as you were saying, you see yourselves as a full European production company. When did you establish the London office then?
That's a good question. I mean, we've always been very active there. You know, probably I think Garage might have been the first time we had investment from Film 4, but always very active. I mean, it's always that thing that, you know, the UK is such a natural kind of partner for us, you know, Anglophone, etc., but also quite a hard nut to crack, you know, and took us a while. But I also, my now wife, then girlfriend lived in London, and so I've been going backwards and forwards to London since the early 2000s. just knocking on doors and making contacts and all of that stuff. And so much so that I think we're, in the UK, we're definitely almost seen as a British company, and in Ireland as an Irish company. And indeed, we've a very busy office in London, in Fitzrovia, with a lot of, our editorial producing team are based out of there. And we, very often make things in the UK. We had a show that went out on Tuesday night called The Listeners, full on UK show on BBC One, with Rebecca Hall, written by Jordan Tanhill and directed by Janica Bravo. And that's effectively a British drama out of our London office.
This is when you get into the interesting distinctions at IFTA and BAFTA and the rest as to what is and isn't an Irish or British.
Yeah. It's funny, that was something that people talked a lot about back in the day, but I don't know that anyone wastes too much time talking or thinking about it anymore, particularly. But yeah, and it's also that great thing. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too, in your work, and that, like, in a way, the British include us in. They think Irish people are the same as they are and from the same place almost, in the way that they think about Welsh or Scottish, or there's a very inclusive impulse towards Irish people, which means you can kind of move through the system there really very well, and people are very open to Irish producers, writers, directors, as if they were British, if you like. We don't necessarily feel that as Irish people, but they're very welcoming, and that's been really important to us, having support from not only Film 4, but BBC Films and BBC Drama and at BFI. And actually it's our British business is, probably much bigger than our Irish business at this point,
Hey, but it's still, I mean, Dublin is still home. So,
Definitely. Yeah, no, definitely Dublin is absolutely home. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So then this kind of identifying Yorgos, bringing him into the fold, brings you to The Lobster. That's 2015, another big year in the world of Element with Room and Oscar.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, you identify all the milestone movies very well, but that was, of course, a really important film again for us. I mean, it sort of actually came out of, I suppose, having had, like Frank hadn't quite landed the way we'd hoped, the film that Lenny made with Michael Fassbender. Although I think it's sort of grown in cult status, but didn't have a great sort of first launch internationally at Sundance. And Lenny at that time was, in a way, like he'd made also what Richard did, was almost a kind of big secret in the international industry. Like what Richard did really made an impression of Toronto when it was on there, and Frank also did, despite it not quite landing as well as we hoped at the time. But we chased after Room very, very kind of avidly. We were very kind of, Lenny and I, in our boardroom, going through book lists, going, is there anything here that we could look to do and try and do something a bit more ambitious and a bit more international? And we literally came across, Room in a listing at the New York Times bestsellers or whatever, and reached out to Emma Donoghue, who initially wasn't that taken by the idea of working with two slight no-hopers from home on her, big successful book. But eventually she came around, and yeah, Room is a very important film for us. First time we had Oscar nominations, and indeed a win for Brie Larson. And really, I guess, sort of put us on the map internationally, and crucially in LA, got us a bit of attention in LA. And because, LA is still the center of our business, and it's also, where Oscars matter the most in terms of reputation building is in LA. There it's a kind of concentric circle of relevance and importance out from LA. The further away you get from LA, the less they mean. But in LA, there's still a real currency. And so if you've made a film that has Oscar nominations or awards or whatever, that really gives you a kind of a profile in the industry there, which is really, really important.
And it gets you invited to the parties, which is
It does,
always,
but also more than that, it's actually it's a kind of a trust thing. It's a kind of stamp of blue chipness or something, and it just boils down to if we send a script to an agency in LA now, we're the people who did Room, The Lobster, Poor Things, The Favorite, etc. Uh, whereas if it's just before then it's like, oh yeah, they made some really interesting small films in Ireland. I'm not sure we can remember what they're called, but they're nice people. It's the difference between those two things, and it's kind of just reputation building, which is so important in our business, as in all businesses, I'm sure.
oh yeah, no, absolutely. But that was the we're here, the Irish are coming kind of moment
Well,
for,
it was also the year of Brooklyn,
yeah,
so it was actually really nice. That was probably the first time that you had, we've seen now a couple of times, uh, but surprisingly, and for which we're all very grateful, kind of, years where the Irish have really, really loomed large in the awards race. And yet that was probably the first time that there was, and I think there was other stuff that year as well, wasn't there? I can't quite remember now, but there were other Irish people around and Irish films in the conversation as well that year. But I guess it was Room and Brooklyn, crucially.
they were definitely the front runners.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. It was just a marvelous thing, and everyone got to wrap themselves in the green flag, as Don
Yeah. Well, I think
say.
it's also, I guess it was, like we have had, kind of obviously Jim and Neil have, for a long time been making real inroads in that. But I suppose there might have been a gap, there might have been a few years, I suppose, between, Jim and Neil's great successes and the Room, Brooklyn kind of generation, if you like. So I think it building on Jim and Neil's success, it kind of, I think reminded us as a filmmaking nation what might be possible and what
Yeah,
what
that
it,
we
what is
can.
possible and what we've built on since, I think, incredibly,
Yeah. The other one that year was Stutter. Benjamin Cleary
That's
won
right,
the.
which won Best Film, didn't it?
Yeah,
And did
and
John Carney have a nomination that year? Did he? Or am I wrong about that?
yeah, for best song
Best
for,
song. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. No, there was a few. Yeah, there was. I remember there was definitely a gang feeling, a very nice kind of, yeah, Irish are in town vibe going down, which was nice.
Bringing you back then to domestically 2017, and you're the 20 just after Room and all that success, you start making a soap for TV3.
That's right. We did.
Virgin Media. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. And again, really opportunistic. And it came up like sorry, TV3 at that time had lost all of their ITV soaps. They'd lost Corrie and Emmerdale, and so they decided to commission a domestic soap, David McRedmond, who now is CEO of An Post. And I was good friends with John York, who was the commissioning editor at Channel 4 when we made Oma, the film Oma. So I knew him from then, and John is a kind of script guru and also ran EastEnders and brilliant kind of producer of serial drama, was head of drama series at BBC, and we clocked this possibility and then called John and we got together and Peter McKenna wrote, I think, 4 or 5 pages of a pitch, and we got commissioned to make, God knows how many episodes, 50 episodes of this show on the basis of a 4-page pitch from Peter. And a lot of faith placed in us by TV3 and David McRedmond at TV3, who just let us get on with it. And we had a great time doing that show. It was so much fun. We made it for nothing, I think like 50 grand an episode, shot it in 2 days, all kind of handheld, single camera. And it really landed and, became also a sort of a kind of breeding ground for a generation of Irish actors who've gone on to do really well, and Irish directors and writers, etc., who all came out of that writer's room, and we loved doing it. It had such great energy. I mean, I remember we were doing that at the same time as we were shooting Room, and I think Room we had 11 weeks to shoot a 2-hour movie, and at the same time we were doing 2 hours of television in 8 days in Dublin. So it's kind of like stark contrasts, but a really nice one.
I know. I remember at the time talking with, well, more so on the room side, talking with Nathan and with Richie Kendrick and stuff about the just how awkward the thing was to shoot the
Yeah.
room. It's
Yes. Very difficult. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Very tricky. But yeah.
that, that one in particular, room in particular, is the kind of question as to what is an Irish film, and that everything
Yes,
is
totally.
Canadian and set in a non-named US town, you know.
Totally. Yeah. Completely.
But all the creative team, the entire creative team were Irish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
was
Yeah. It's, God knows. Yeah. It's a right head scratcher.
well, I mean, the same thing to that same time, Rob and Rebecca, who I used to work for at Treasure,
Hmm.
they made Viva in
Yes, with
Cuba
Paddy.
in
Yeah.
Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That was around that year as well, because that was a Telluride when we were there with Room.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Halloran also. And I love that film. I thought it was fantastic. Absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous film. And I think actually sort of was a near miss as well, I think, because Paddy was, not a Cuban filmmaker. I think had he been a Cuban or Spanish language filmmaker, I think that would have got an Oscar nomination for sure. But
It was on the short list, but
it
yeah.
was a near miss, gorgeous film though.
Yeah, a couple of years later, we decided to crack open the bottle of champagne that was kept in the fridge for it had it been Oscar nominated, but sadly,
Yeah. Well,
it
it's
was.
very much worth celebrating.
Sorry, bringing it back then to so the Red Rock kind of that got you used to making TV,
Yeah.
which leads us to the next big mile marker of Normal People.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're picking all the right ones, Normal People, and another transformational thing for us. And I mean, we had been doing TV and I'd been doing TV back with David Collins and Samson, done Pure Mule and Bachelor's Work together years before that was almost in parallel with Element. I had that company with David. Um, and, um, yeah, and we the way Normal People came about is that we were already developing Conversations with Friends as a film with Sally, and then so we were on the list to get the book for Normal People, and when it came in, it just seemed so obviously a piece for television, just because of the episodic nature of the storytelling, and and uh, and I was, talking to Rose Garnett, who is uh, someone I've worked with a lot, who's currently at A24, but at that time was head of film at BBC, but also was involved in the drama team there. And she'd read it. We'd been developing Conversations with Friends with her at BBC Film. And she'd read it, and we agreed it would be a great TV show. And I gave it to Lenny, obviously, and we'd been in Trinity together. So it was, albeit many years before, but the world that we knew extremely well and had grown up in, and he loved it and loved Sally's writing. And then the BBC did a really brave and brilliant thing because there was so much interest in the book from international buyers and producers and studios. The BBC, Piers Wenger, there was the head of drama at the time, basically said, "Well, look, we'll green light this on the basis of Lenny's interests, and you can go back to Sally and tell her if you guys, Element and Lenny, get the book, we BBC will make it. We guarantee it'll be made," which was huge, absolutely huge. Because so much of the time, what happens is you get an agreement to develop something, but not to actually green light it to production. And that was such a pleasurable experience to know that, when we got the book and, Sally decided she'd write the first 6 episodes, that we weren't doing that in a kind of, there was no what if about whether we were making it or not. We were absolutely making it. And there's such a nice process around that when you're making something in terms of the scripts and all that kind of stuff. And you're not trying to second guess the commissioning editor and their read or this or that. You're just trying to do the very best job possible. That probably, Normal People is one of the most pleasurable, rewarding, fun things we've ever done. And, that's down to the kind of the team we did it with, myself and Emma Norton and Chelsea and Andrew, obviously, and Lenny and Catherine McGee and the Element crew, and then obviously Sally and Alice Birch and Marco Rowe, and then finding Paul and Daisy and all the other great young cast of actors and also our great crew. So it was just this really kind of golden thing that just worked, and they're not all like that, I can promise you. But yeah, it's the standard by which we could almost judge everything else we do. Is like, does it have the potential to be that kind of thing? And also, I know when I'm on my deathbed and looking back, it'll be one of the few things that I'll be very, very grateful to be involved in and very proud of.
It came out, like at the perfect time in terms of
Perfect.
the zeitgeist, thing,
Yeah.
the escapist COVID TV series.
Yeah.
Because one of the last things that I did prior to lockdown was meet you actually at the
Oh yeah.
end of the Dublin Film Festival.
Yeah.
You and Andrew had been over at Berlin at the
Oh
film
yeah.
festival.
Yeah.
Back because herself was the
Oh,
closing film of the Dublin
Yeah.
Film Festival, and you came into the after party, and I always vividly remember it because the two of you came in and you saw, and I was there, and you came over to talk to me, and Andrew did an elbow bump, and you gave me a hug, and I was like, "Are we doing this?"
Oh, because of COVID.
Because of
Yeah.
COVID, and I was like, and but it's the
Yeah.
difference between you and Andrew was personified in that a moment where Andrew was like, "Yeah, I'm the less risk averse or the more risk averse
I
person."
don't know if that's really true of him, but yeah, maybe I knew you better now. I would say that maybe.
That could be it.
Yeah. But yeah. No, it was crazy, and we were just talking about it the other day. Actually, a few of us. It was just crazy, and yeah, seeing Paul now in all his gladiator glory, it's crazy to think that was only not even 5 years ago, actually, when that show came out.
Yeah, and Daisy leading Twisters earlier this year.
Totally, yeah. We had a lovely kind of, we were all in Skull earlier this year, kind of, and it was the 4-year anniversary of starting Normal People. Also coincided with Daisy's 26th birthday, which is mad to think she turned 21 just before we started shooting Normal People. So young, and they've both done so well, and so proud of them, and two great people who deserve it all,
Yeah, no, absolutely. But then that gave you a calling card into a whole different world. That started to set you up for success in television in a way that almost nothing else could.
Yeah, it was. Listen, just the start of the line there, and I think I'm really aware how lucky we were with it. Like, had that show not gone out in COVID, probably wouldn't have made the impression it did, and it definitely was just all the everything coming together, and also the kind of show that it was, which was about intimacy and connection at a time when people were feeling very isolated and disconnected, and also just the way it took off in the States, like, it was unbelievable, really. I'm sure, definitely to this day, the most successful Irish thing in America, Irish show in America, I think, ever. Still, and probably in the UK too, probably. But yeah, listen, it was just very grateful it came along, and we were able to grab it and make something of it, and it did definitely set us up. It's, it's sort of it's a show that's known all over the world, and has become a kind of Irish brand, an Irish cultural brand, along with the other Irish cultural brands, and yeah, it definitely helps us and has helped us, and probably, I think, also because we went. I remember myself and Lenny went to LA the Oscar weekend, 2014. No, sorry, what I'm talking, 2019, to pitch the show. And it was the Friday before the Sunday of the Oscars, and we had, I don't know, 9 nominations for The Favourite that Sunday. And so it was a great time to be pitching the show, and we went around every single, network in the States. And then Sally would dial in, from Ireland, and the three of us pitched to everybody in LA. And it was these two things, The Favourite and Normal People, happening at that time was, I think, what sort of definitely kind of propelled us again into another league in a way, and also the made us attractive to kind of potential investors and buyers and bigger companies looking at us, etc., which then led to Fremantle in a couple of years later, basically when they acquired a majority stake in the company. So again, those two, Favourite and Normal People. And the other thing about The Favourite, which was very important, is that we were back with another filmmaker, if you like, that we kind of could show that as a company we could make Oscar-worthy films with different filmmakers. That definitely helped us as well.
Yeah, I mean, just the year prior to Killing a Sacred Deer was multiple award winning as well. It
It
just didn't
was,
quite
yeah. And The
the
Lobster also
Oscar.
did really well. And, I got an Oscar nomination for Yorgos Lanthimos for Best Screenplay, Best Original Screenplay. So they were they were very important films. But I think that kind of, that sort of whatever mashup of Normal People and The Favourite, that sort of moment, not that it was a moment, but, that kind of them coming out close to each other definitely helped.
And now it's a kind of disappointing year if you don't get back to the Oscars, huh?
Well, I'm really, really, really happy not to be there this year because last year was a lot. So I'm hopefully, please God, we'll be back sometime in the future. But it's also quite, and it does sound like a first world problem, but it's quite tiring, and it's also nice to be at home and just actually doing the day job properly rather than swanning about hoping you're going to win awards or whatever, fretting about that. Takes a lot of energy, which isn't necessarily the most productive energy.
And time as well.
Time,
Just takes
time, totally, completely.
and you
And
get
it's,
flying back and forth alone.
yeah, no, it's yeah, and carbon footprints and all that stuff. So it's no, so it's actually very nice to be, yeah, just kind of down in the weeds on new projects and thinking about what's next and trying to get things away and all that. So very happy to be doing that.
Yeah, so now I mean, you have a number of films that are sort of doing the circuit now
Yeah,
for that to come out early next year
yeah, yeah,
with On Becoming a Guinea Fowl, which is
yeah,
a very odd name.
yeah, yeah. Gorgeous, gorgeous movie. But yeah, that's doing really well. Actually, won Best Film at Zurich and has 8 BIFA nominations in December. And yeah, it's really. And then Ariane Lebed's debut, September Says, that's kind of out and about, very much so. And then we have 3 films in post. We have Harry Lighton's debut, Pillion, which is set in the world of gay S&M bikers. He's a British filmmaker that's set in the UK. We have a film we made in Nigeria last year with Akinola Davis, a young Nigerian filmmaker, his debut, called My Father's Shadow. And then, of course, we have a new Yorgos, Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons in Begonia, which will come out at the end of next year. So they're all in post, and then we're just trying to figure out what we're shooting next. And yeah, for some hopefully promising things in the works.
Yeah, meanwhile you were busy in between with like things like the Gallows Pole, like having Shane
Yes,
Medal, and
yeah.
then the listeners and the one that the Watchers, was it, that you shot out in the
Yeah, we weren't. That was more like a service production thing. We
yeah.
weren't involved in that editorially, but all the others we were, yeah, fully stuck in on. Yeah, definitely.
So I mean, you have a fairly large and diverse company now,
We
you know.
do. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us, and it is very much a kind of, it's almost a producers collective in the sense that there's obviously mentioned Anna and Chelsea earlier, who are really long-standing colleagues, and kind of Chelsea started off as Andrew, my assistant, way back when she just left NYU, and she's now doing amazing stuff as a producer. And Emma Norton came on a kind of almost a career break and never left. And her kids are growing up in Ireland and are young Irish kids. And then in London, we've Rachel Dargood and Michael Dawson, 2 producers there, and Chris Aird, who's our head of drama in the UK. So there's a big gang of us, and everyone has their own kind of tastes and interests. But we also managed to have a kind of, I think, a common taste and a common palate. And yeah. So that's a lot of fun. That kind of, and we work together a lot. So very often there'll be two or three of us on any one thing, and yeah, we're although it's very tough times in the industry at the moment, as I'm sure you know. I mean, Ireland's actually having quite a good time because there's a lot of incoming stuff here, but UK is pretty bad and the US is terrible. But I sort of feel it's at the bottom of it, bottom of the cycle, and I think I'm hoping that next year things will perk up a bit,
Well,
But
the streamers now, with the exception of Peacock, have all seemed to have found an equilibrium. Disney is reporting profits. Paramount got taken over by Skydance. So there is a
the
turn.
green shoots. I think you're right about that. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I mean, you guys are very well placed now to move on. And I don't know what's the next. What worlds have you left to conquer? Are you Alexander?
Listen, like we've obviously had, some successes. We've also had lots of failure and lots of struggle along the way, so we don't take anything for granted. And it's all hard work, none of it comes easy. And I think it's really, in a careful way, it's about expanding the kind of the filmmakers we work with, Chelsea and Emma and our other colleagues are very much, building their own relationships with filmmakers and bringing them to the company. And we're very keen to make more movies with, I suppose, the best filmmakers working today, but in that kind of, whether you want to call it auteur, art house space. Excited for that. And then also making kind of hopefully bold, entertaining television. They're the kind of the twin engines of the company, really, those two things.
And long may you succeed at it.
We'll see, but yeah, thanks for that, Niall.
All right, so it's been an absolute pleasure. I will let you go. I know
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, listen, stay safe. See you soon, and thanks for your interest.
All right, cheers. Thank you very much, Ed.
All the best. Thank you.
Visit Film Ireland today and you can sign up for the Film Ireland newsletter and never miss another podcast.